When the puppet master gave old Joe time, he climbed out, feeling the emptiness, reminded by the distant woman with an umbrella of the thrilling rainy night. He recalled being knocked out in the park chase. No matter how Joe yelled, she ignored him. That girl thought old Joe was a creep, completely unaware that old Joe had years of pent-up resentment ready to be shipped out at any moment. He completely ignored the unfortunate goons and immediately accelerated in pursuit of the woman, only to catch up to the eye-catching bright yellow umbrella, which surprisingly turned out to belong to a homeless man. He angrily questioned the stranger when suddenly a girl rushed in, thinking old Joe needed first aid. But old Joe had to sneak away to avoid getting caught by the cops, only to be halted by the girl right before his exit. Finding old Joe suspicious, she handed him her business card, eager to help, while old Joe thought, if only she knew how needy I am. Yet he hardly recognized himself while relating his 20-year saga, hoping she'd help investigate, which had just begun. Just then, the mysterious phone rang, and old Joe's daughter said something that left him scratching his head. But he figured out two things: his daughter was in his hands, and this guy was the puppet master who kept him locked up. To save his daughter, old Joe pulled out the list, only to find that many big names from 20 years ago had moved on with her. After a long night's hustle, old Joe collapsed, and when his friend found him, he was already out cold. Instinctively, he dialed for help, but upon seeing someone, he froze and couldn't answer. Old Joe just couldn't muster the courage to reply, thinking, why am I dialing 911 again? But upon noticing the business card in his hand, he pondered, what measures should I take for that girl who remained unable to open it that night? The man in front seemed intrigued by his story, and finding out he'd been missing for 20 years only fueled his curiosity high. He started rummaging through Joe's letters, revealing Joe's deep longing, but didn't notice Joe had woken up. The heartfelt words made the girl warm up to him, while old Joe remained suspicious, thinking, this girl sure is prepared. The kind-hearted girl was such a contrast to old Joe as she offered her help. She was eager to see old Joe reunite with his daughter, but he clutched the letter for her, thinking, no way I'm letting you in on this. Just then, the puppet master texted again, forcing him to visit his pre-capture boss, the only name on the list, knowing it was profitless. But upon seeing the boss, he quickly changed his mind about the profit, as the boss was utterly confused, clearly unable to refuse him. The girl followed old Joe, hoping to assist. When stuck, a takeout sparked a new idea. With the girl's assistance, old Joe searched for the restaurant with the dragon logo and sped off to Chinatown, starting his door-to-door inquiries. But upon seeing the familiar dumplings, he sensed trouble because the taste was nothing like he remembered. He ditched the little buddy and set off solo, ordering dumplings at every restaurant, but the flavors were all off. As the girl went to work, old Joe continued haunting the remaining 70 Chinese restaurants. Finally, he discovered that elusive taste, and he and crew went to town on it. It was a whole day waiting for this. But he caught the sight that made him wary, stacks of takeout at the counter, and a big guy came in to grab them all. He snatched up the renovation hammer from the boss lady, jumped on the delivery bag, and chased after him. Just before the guy's door slammed shut, old Joe slipped into the garage, taking out the guard with that hammer of pure cinematic magic. Yes, as he shielded his face with a takeout box, the guard swung open the door, oblivious to what was happening. The chief in the surveillance room heard no commotion, while the inmates were starving. As soon as the chief opened the door, he was met with a punch. Old Joe promptly pinned him to the desk, showing no mercy to this goon who'd imprisoned him for 20 years. He used a blade to peel back the chief's flesh to force him to spill the beans, making the cuts worse by pouring salt into the wounds. After a session of delightful torture, the chief finally revealed the clue a tape recorder had kept for himself, just meant for old Joe. Are you sure I'm the one? Fantastic. How soon can we turn this old Joe into the guest delight? 20 years, is that feasible? But before Joe could ask more questions. Just then, a commotion at the door suggested someone had stumbled upon the bodies outside. As old Joe dragged the chief out, a crowd had already gathered at the door. He managed to slip out of the building, enemies awaited him outside, and after a fierce battle, old Joe got stabbed. He had thought his days were numbered, but the moment he stepped out of his door, two individuals suddenly lunged at him, and eventually old Joe found himself at his buddy's bar. Though overwhelmed by pain, he still clung to that girl's number, thinking to himself, "At least I still have the chance to reach out to her." Finally, I can get in touch with her, he cheered internally. Despite his pain, it was all going to work out. As he answered the call, everything seemed to fall into place perfectly. She stood up fiercely for old Joe amidst her colleagues' questioning, a feeling too deep for words. Unknowingly, he became more significant to her than her daily co-workers. A colleague warned old Joe to tread lightly around the girl as they passed, hinting they clearly had a history. Meanwhile, the girl playfully tugged at old Joe's tattered shirt and gave him a cheeky wink. Oblivious to her misstep, she turned to leave, fading away into a pink-hued daydream. Sitting at the bar, bored stiff, old Joe's phone rang suddenly, but the other end went silent. He had no choice but to call back, ready to unleash some old-school justice.